there's something you can do to feel like you're getting closer to your purpose, go for it. But if you're not and it's a job, that's okay. And I think that's the beauty of employee ownership is there's no favor. You as an employee, you as the person doing the work that moves this organization forward deserve a piece of it.
Welcome to Empowered Owners, the podcast that takes you inside Empowered Ventures. I'm your host, Chris Fredericks. In each episode, I'll have a discussion with one of our employees to discover and highlight their distinct personalities, perspectives, and skills, while also keeping you in the loop with exclusive news, updates on company performance, and a glimpse into the future plans of Empowered Ventures. This is an opportunity for me to learn more about our amazing employee owners, and an opportunity for you to hear regularly from me and others from within Empowered Ventures. Welcome to another episode of Empowered Owners, the community building podcast about and for the employee owners of Empowered Ventures. My name's Chris Fredericks, and on today's episode, I'm talking with two recent additions to our holding company team, Webb and Casey Grisez. We had a lot of fun digging into their stories and their common craving to do purposeful, impactful work, which I think a lot of our employee owners will relate to. With that, let's get to my conversation with Christine and Casey. Christine, Casey, welcome to Empowered Owners.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great to be here.
Good. Really excited about this. So you both have joined Empowered Ventures fairly recently and, been hard at work for the last few months, kind of settling in. And from my perspective, it's going just fantastically. So excited you're part of the team now. And we've been envisioning this kind of conversation and a little bit of an introduction for both of you to the rest of the team. But also there's maybe some shared kind of perspectives, I think, that about career and some things that'll be fun to dig into. So to kickstart, though, I thought it'd be fun to ask you each, and maybe we'll start with you, Christine. What was that thing that this is what I'm going to be when I grow up?
Oh, my goodness. I think a veterinarian first and foremost.
Nice. So were you really into animals as a kid?
Yes, I was super into animals. Yeah, I was one of those kiddos that just couldn't get enough of pretending to be vet with my stuffed animals and things like that. But then shortly after that, I think I got really involved in movements or whatever, as funny as that sounds. So our church was really involved in a lot of community stuff. So then I wanted to be some kind of an activist shortly after that.
Oh, okay. So it kind of shifted your attention away from the veterinary idea.
Yes.
Well, cool. That's super interesting. Maybe we'll get back into that as well. But Casey, how about you? What did you want to be when you grew up?
About equally as altruistic as being an activist. Either a professional athlete, the most altruistic among us. Either professional, I think baseball was my first love, and then golf. So either pro baseball player, pro golfer, or with Top Gun being the greatest movie of all time, at one point wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Yeah, very realistic dream for all kids.
Always. Yeah. Really picked out the high percentage play.
Love it. Love it. Maybe also would be fun to start with a quick intro. So Christine, why don't you just share a little bit more about yourself? Where are you from? What have you done at this point in your life? Some quick highlights.
So I was born and raised South Central Indiana. So Columbus and Franklin and Greenwood. And then around middle school, my family moved to Lafayette, Indiana. So that was where I went to middle school and high school. And then I played golf at Franklin College, and then I eventually transferred down to IU where I got a degree in social work. But my first major was world lit. So I went from world lit to social work. So again, kind of those funny transitions in life. And then I was in the social work field for probably about 5 or 6 years and did what any good bleeding heart does and ran myself ragged. And so then I just kind of tried on a lot of different things from there and ended up with a certificate in massage and got really into holistic health and wellness and another certificate in holistic nutrition and things like that. And did that for quite a while and had my daughter and then got really excited about the idea of rethinking childcare. So I piloted a program there, and most of my life I've worked for myself or been a contract worker and then have invented a lot of things from nothing. It's given me a really interesting skill set overall.
That's such a fascinating background. And in social work, your first 5 to 6 years out of college, what was your focus area?
So I started with individuals with developmental disabilities, and then my capstone in college was working with individuals with HIV and kind of in the housing sector of all of that, stable housing, addressing those Maslow's hierarchies so that people could live their best and fullest lives. And then my most notable social work piece was probably getting to be a case manager and running a men's halfway house for men who were recovering from addiction. So that was a really awesome experience and a very wild experience. There was a lot that went along with that.
Yeah, some pretty altruistic kind of orientations in your career right from the beginning. Is that kind of how you feel like you've always been, that altruistic mindset?
Yeah, I think so. I think that when I see things that need improvement or just a desire to help, I think that's just kind of been me from day one. And that's looked a lot of different ways through the years. And
Do you have a sense of where that comes from?
I don't. My mom has this really silly, not a silly story, but I guess it's one of those childhood stories that she, embarrassingly tells at inopportune moments, where she said she walked into my room once and I was playing with my, stuffed animals. And she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, well, my stuffed animals, they have special needs. So I'm making accommodations for them." And I'd built a wheelchair for one of my teddy bears and had tied a blindfold around another stuffed animal and was trying to help them around the room. So
That's so adorable.
Yeah.
And so sweet.
Yeah, I think I literally was just kind of born with that helping spirit.
Wow. That's so cool. Well, let's get Casey into the conversation again. Casey, so what about you? Give us a little bit of background, kind of where you grew up and what you've done, in your life to this point.
You got to stop letting Christine go first because sure. her career choices make mine look bad. No, so I born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. So unfortunately, a long-suffering Cleveland sports fan. Ended up down in Columbus at Ohio State. So I started in engineering. Quickly decided I'm not an engineer. The math got way too hard. So got an economics degree and have been in Columbus ever since, other than a couple of years that I worked in New York City, which was an amazing experience. So my career path has been a little indirect, we'll say. I think the through line, so it's basically kind of a diversified, for the most part, diversified finance background. So started in with a big bank, a couple 100,000 employees doing private banking sort of work. And a quick detour in corporate relations at my alma mater, Ohio State, where that was kind of a relationship manager sort of role.
Corporate relations, what does that mean?
Yeah, so that's effectively serving as a liaison between companies and university. So it's technically a fundraising role, but it's very much kind of strategic and analytical. And for a given company, it's like, okay, is giving a gift, does that make the most sense for trying to recruit the top student, or, just get general awareness for a product or service you're offering, something like that, or working like a sponsored research project. So is there something you as a business are thinking about that we could get a few engineers for a lot less money than you as a business doing it, potentially buying technology, right? So it's kind of all the things university offers and any of the things that a company may need. It's trying to connect those two pieces. So I did the work a little bit when I was in college and just enjoyed it. And so got the opportunity to go back. And from a, again, relationship management type of perspective, it was an invaluable experience. But you kind of felt the itch to get back at that point into finance and was pursuing the CFA, the Chartered Financial Analyst certification, and learned about these things called private companies. Always knew they existed, but that was kind of the first exposure to what private business is, what they can do, how they really are such a huge part of our economy and a huge part of the employment base. So I ended up getting into business valuation, which is, long story short, trying to find stock prices for privately held companies. So you have the stock market for public companies that tell you what their stocks are worth, privately held companies for various reasons, whether it's legal or regulatory, or if a business owner is looking at selling and just wants to know what their business may be worth. Or in my case, and this is where things overlap here with EV, is we did a lot of ESOP valuations. So really got kind of the first exposure to what ESOPs are, what employee ownership is, and went from there and kind of got a little bit more of the private banking, wealth management, investment banking, a little bit more traditional finance stuff. But I always had this employee ownership thing in the back of my head. And I think that was, and it kind of ties into what we're going to talk about here, but it was a first exposure to business being a force for good. And I think kind of the role that business can play in kind of some of the broader things in society, and if for better and for worse. And I think in a lot of cases with employee ownership, it's for better. And that's what brought me here to TV.
That's great. So, and that is kind of how we know each other, right? So one of your engagements was TVF back in the day, which when TVF was the core ESOP that led to EV.
Yeah. And you kept up a relationship with me. So I don't know what that says about us, but but here we are.
Yeah. So it's been, that was a long time ago, and it's fun that it ended up leading to this, but you're self-deprecating. I think people have gotten that by now. A lot of how you've described your career totally makes sense. But what I know about you is similar to Christine in that you do have a sense of kind of a desire to feel a sense of meaning in the work you do. And even maybe something you left out is one of the most important jobs you've ever had is the last couple of years, right? So what have you been doing the last couple of years?
So just a touch in the self-deprecation, I should have mentioned I have 4 older brothers. So as the youngest of 5 boys, self-deprecation is how you get through the day. Yeah, so the last full-time job I had before EV, we have twin 5-year-old boys, Fitz and Lou. So it was about a year before they're going to start preschool. There was a potential relocation for one of the jobs, and life was just a little hairy. Wasn't the husband I wanted to be, wasn't the dad I wanted to be. I knew the boys were about a year away from starting preschool. And so we took them out of daycare, and I spent about a year about full time. And then they started preschool, which was half day. So kind of kept up that schedule where I was, I call it my sabbatical. Around my house, I referred myself as the Cinderfella. So, but again, it was just kind of this confluence of big questions I was asking myself in life, big questions asking myself in my career. And I think being able to take that time away, there's no better way to get perspective on all things than being around kids. They have a way of either bringing you down when you're flying a little too high or bringing you up when you're down in the dump. So incredible perspective and just an incredible experience. And talk about meaning in careers, meaning in work. There's nothing more meaningful than that.
That's awesome. I love that so much. And it's not without risk. I mean, you were in a very traditional career and you chose to really kind of take a break from that. Not that you entirely stopped working, but was that a hard decision to make?
That's a good question. It was, I forget, was it Mark Twain that talked about going broke? It happens gradually and then suddenly or something. I'm butchering the quote, but it was one of those I had been thinking about stepping away. And so my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and, I had an incredible experience because of it. And there's just something about that quality time. Once you have twins, for us at least, for anyone who has twins and then has more kids, good for you. When we kind of decided, like, okay, we're good now. So knew it was going to kind of be my one chance at doing that. So kind of always thought about it. And then just again, with what was going on kind of personally and professionally at the time, it was like, this is the right thing to do. There was a little more uncertainty kind of leading up to it. But once kind of that moment hit, it was like, I'm 100% in on this. And, I think having good relationships and a good network, I was confident, maybe misplaced, but I was confident that if I needed to get back into the workforce quickly, I felt pretty confident I could do it. Just a shout out to my wife who runs our local community foundation. And that was part of stepping away too, was giving her the time and the space to build that and to focus on that. And that's gone really well. And so, so things have worked out, fortunately.
Yeah, that's great. So Christine, coming back to you, I was thinking about how all the different things you mentioned, social work, and then going into the other things you ended up doing after that, they all do have this kind of, keep thinking about that altruistic word, or, really a sense of meaning and purpose, the impact potential of all those jobs and things you've chosen to do previously. Even the way you described, especially the social work years, which there's a stereotype, I think, for social work careers. They can be very challenging for the social worker. I think there's a burden, I think, to some degree that social workers bear that can be above and beyond to other careers from what I've gathered. But just in general, how have you thought about your own desire to have an impact through your work, but also the impact it's having on you? The enjoyment ultimately matters too. And I wonder how you've thought, or when you think back of all your steps, like, how have you thought about that balance, or even whether balance is even possible in a career like that?
Yeah, no, that's like $1 million question, right? And
yeah, I thought I'd give you an easy question.
Yeah, no, ironically, in our little co-working building here, there's a psychiatrist, and I told him what I was doing for Empowered Ventures and that I had been in social work. And he goes, he's like, well, there's two types of people in social work. The ones that go straight to heaven and then the ones that find something else to do. And I was like, yeah, I guess that's true, isn't it? But, for me, I think I can't do much things without value and meaning, and I've explored all the different personality tests and had my moments where I've really looked at that introspectively. And there's definitely a balance, I think, between placating to my own ego and, and wanting to help and bordering on wanting to save and things like that. But also just what was actually woven underneath that, which I didn't explore as much in high school and college, was that I'm really good at logistics. I'm really good at looking at a problem from lots of different angles, and it doesn't necessarily matter what the problem is, or if it's social work, or if it's the inaccessibility to, affordable childcare and alternatives to that, or even looking at like holistic health, and that giant umbrella of a term. Yeah, there's actually I think my brain just really likes looking at everything and then coming up with a plan and kind of that execution. The other thing that had kind of come to mind was one of the most frustrating things, I would say, with the social work piece was that you realize the importance of the institutions, right? And the funding sources. And it was never the individuals and their quote unquote, problems that wore me out. It was the systems that I would bump up against, that you understood why a person was in a certain predicament, or that you looked at these people and they were trying as hard as they absolutely could. And they were literally in systems that would not allow them to succeed, would not allow them to have mind, body, spirit balance.
Super interesting. Casey, what are your thoughts hearing that? What comes to mind when you heard all that?
I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is just how unfortunate it is that there are, on one hand, people that need help, on the other hand, people that want to help, and that there are things in the way preventing that from happening. I think as the richest, most technologically advanced nation in the history of the world, we should be able to connect. As much as I like to live in the world of is, not should, but we should be able to connect those two a lot better than we do. And I'm grateful. I other than Christine, know a lot of social workers and people who do that kind of work. And it's selfless work. Christine mentioned the word ego. I don't think ego is involved at all. I think it's people who, again, see that they're not doing it for the pay. That's for damn sure. So there are people who see an opportunity, who see a need, and are willing to step up and sacrifice. They're willing to sacrifice financially. They're willing to sacrifice their own mental health for what they see and do day in and day out. And it's the real, not all heroes wear capes kind of thing. And it's absolutely true in this case.
I love that. What came to mind for me, and Christine, I'm curious what you think about this. There's kind of like almost 3 levels of meaning in what you said, what I heard, which was interesting. Like when it comes to career, maybe the impact of the actual work. So the social worker's impact on the people that they're serving ultimately. Then there's what you are doing, the actual chore, the job itself. Maybe being good at what you actually do on a day-to-day basis actually matters too. Because I can imagine someone who might go after a career based on the impact, but do they pick the right task within that career that they are going to feel fulfilled doing over and over and over and over again? And then the third part, which you referred to as the institution, is that some broader sense of who do you have to work with to do this career? The micro team you're part of, the broader kind of funding mechanism. So all 3 of those maybe makes me wonder if all 3 of those need to be in a good place to ultimately feel like, you're in maybe a sustainable career that can have impact. I'm curious if all that kind of resonates for you.
Oh, yeah. No, like I said, the deep levels of introspection, because when I did step away from social work, it felt like a very interesting loss, because again, I saw myself as this person, this helper, this person, but the actual day-to-day and doing more along the lines of being in those one-on-one positions with people, I'm just a sensitive human being, and so it was very hard to compartmentalize a lot of that. But the success I did have, again, in housing, but most of it was housing, more or less, that whole career in different shapes and fashions. But I was really good at the logistics. I was really good at being like, okay, this is who we follow up with. All right, we've got these 4 different entities. They all need to be communicated with. What is the best way to get us all on the same page? How do we correspond? How do we document everything that's happening? So I started to, again, I think just feel what that actual groove was and what that actually meant to me.
Makes sense. And a lot of times just getting things done involves figuring out all these complicated systems and logistics that most people just don't have the experience or the time to figure out. So it makes sense that a lot of the job and being effective in the job could come down to your ability to kind of navigate that. Is that what you're getting at there?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a huge piece of it that again, I didn't necessarily see coming, but that's a big piece of it.
Mm-hmm. So what ended up leading you ultimately to joining EV? Like, I know maybe cutting to the end of the story to some degree, but like, why are you here now? And what drew you to EV?
Oh man. I remember when the post was shared with me and I was on the EV website and I actually watched a podcast with you, Chris, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, these are the good guys. And I just loved this idea of, again, my experiences are like much more community level, community based, grassroots based. But again, what I feel has the most impact is these higher levels of institutions that actually have the bandwidth, the manpower, the finances to really support and lift in the sustainability there. So I think I was just ready for another change. I love a good challenge. I was definitely, now that I have a child, again, priorities shift, right? So I was definitely looking for some more stability there as well. But yeah, I was really, again, drawn to this idea of, oh, wow, I think I could really be useful in this area, this arena.
That's great. First few months, how are you feeling?
I love it. I love it so much. I love how dynamic it is. I could go into so much about the role, but honestly, the people, the EV team is amazing. Our operating companies are filled with some of the coolest individuals I've ever met. People from all different parts of the United States, different backgrounds. It's been amazing just to get to know everyone. And in my role, I've kind of gotten to assist in these different ways and make some really cool relationships and connections. So
that's great. Casey, how about you? How did you end up coming to EV?
That's a good question. Having known you since, what was that, 2016, 2017, somewhere around there, I think we first met. When you do business valuations for a living, you meet a lot of different management teams. I think I did something, had to have been 50 valuations. I probably did 200, 250 valuations, maybe 100, 120 different companies, something like that. A few of those were repeats. You see a lot of management teams. I just remember meeting with you and Tad and just being impressed by the business itself. TVF was just a great business. And then, your ability to be on top of things and getting information when we needed it and being responsive and knowing the business and knowing what was going on, answering the questions. I was just impressed. And so I think we connected on LinkedIn at that point. And I stayed in touch with you. And then in 2020, when you launched Empowered Ventures, ESOPs, single company ESOPs can have their downsides. And the ESOP holdco model solves those. And I just remember, kind of reading through, some of the early stuff on the website, or maybe you posted on LinkedIn, wherever I read it, just being really impressed by, this is a really cool model. And so we stayed in touch, and I got to know a few of the other people on the team over time. And yeah, then you hit a point where you needed somebody with my really strange skill set, with something approaching skill with both Excel and writing. So here we are. I think one of those, it was right place, right time, all of that. And I think we got fortunate. I got fortunate, especially, that things have worked out.
Totally. So for those that don't know, your role is kind of half that finance back function that you have so much work experience with, but the other half is a little bit of a new thing for you. It's something you've been working in and doing in a few different ways, but not in like this is my full-time job kind of way, which is marketing and communications and storytelling. So have you always thought of yourself as a storyteller or a communicator, despite, this engineer finance career path?
Yeah. No, I think I always viewed, and maybe this is having worked in valuation where the work product is 80 to 120 page Word document or PDF, but 120 page report that tells the story of the business. And part of the storytelling is the numbers. So it's revenue up or down, profit up or down. And so I think I've always viewed numbers as being part of a story. And it's, numbers are there and they 2 + 2 = 4, but there's a story behind those. So I think that's kind of, I don't know if I knew I viewed it that way, but I did. And I guess just more broadly on writing and communicating. So being the cool kid that I was, I don't know about other states, but in Ohio, we had this thing called Power of the Pen. When I was a kid, maybe 7th and 8th grade, maybe 6th grade, somewhere around there. And these were writing competitions. So you would go on a Saturday and go to an auditorium in a school somewhere and, with a couple hundred other kids, I think from the district. And, they would give you a writing prompt and you'd write it and they would grade it. And I loved that piece of me when I kind of discovered I had this more math and engineering and that sort of side of the brain was effective as well. I kind of lost a little bit of the storytelling and kind of writing and creativity side of the brain. And it's just been, over time. And I think taking a couple of years off from work helped me rediscover that, just having the time and space to kind of think about, okay, what brings me a little bit of joy and how can I best express myself? And for me, it's through words and it's through writing. So I view the role with EV as combining both their storytelling. And it's just, am I storytelling in numbers in an Excel spreadsheet or am I storytelling in an actual story and, basically in a Word document?
That's awesome. And now it's time for our official sponsor of today's episode, which is caseysnotes.com. That's where Casey's writings are. It's not truly the official sponsor, but just in case anybody's curious.
We'll take the free ad spot though.
So check out Casey's Notes. Seriously, check out caseysnotes.com, which is .com, right?
It is, yeah.
Which is where Casey's done some personal writing and sharing. And it's really, honestly, it's awesome. I love its insights from your life and things you think about. And it was a little bit of what got me convinced without knowing, this guy does have not just a finance brain. He does have this other side to himself. So I would definitely encourage anyone to check it out.
And the price to subscribe is free.
Yep.
Smash that subscribe
for
button.
Now.
Yeah, if I have to start paying for ad placements, I may have to charge. But for now.
Yep. That's awesome. So last question for both of you. If you had to give advice to anybody, within Empowered Ventures or outside of Empowered Ventures, just anyone that is feeling like unclear or unsure about that sense of having that sense of impact or purpose in their work, what would you suggest to them in terms of next steps or just a mindset or just anything that could help them to find a way forward with that question?
The biggest thing is to give yourself some grace if you're not necessarily connecting with that purpose. And that's having spent a good chunk of my career in businesses. I think about wealth management, for example, where doing that job well and communicating with people for the money that they have spent their careers accumulating and whether it's they want to put kids through college or they want to retire a little bit early to spend more time with grandkids, kind of whatever. I mean, there's some serious purpose potentially for wealth managers. I think same thing with investment bankers, right? These are blood, sweat, and tears that these owners have put in their businesses for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And you're helping them in these, when these people sell a business, it's up there with getting married, having kids as the most important days of their lives. I don't think most people would view wealth managers or investment bankers as necessarily purpose driven. So I think, you don't necessarily need to view your role as this is my purpose, right? I mean, there are a lot of people who they do a job to put food on the table, put a roof over their heads, clothes on their backs and their kids' backs. And I think that's okay. Part of what we're doing is, I think with EV, I think this is the power of employee ownership is you don't necessarily need to be the super advocate for employee ownership. You don't need to be super connected to the purpose of your business. You still deserve ownership. And I think there's still that fundamental relationship between employer and employee that I think employee ownership puts in place, whether or not you feel like you're jumping out of bed every Monday morning to go do your job. I think that's the ideal. And I would encourage everyone, if there is kind of that inkling, not everyone is in a fortunate place as I am to have taken 2 years off to think about all this stuff. But, if there are roles in the business or roles in other EV businesses or something, if there's something you can do to feel like you're getting closer to your purpose, go for it. But if you're not and it's a job, that's okay. And I think that's the beauty of employee ownership is there's no favor. You as an employee, you as the person doing the work that moves this organization forward deserve a piece of it. I don't know if that answers the question or not, but that's what came to mind.
That's great. Christine, what comes to mind for you?
Oh man, yeah, no, Casey and I accidentally had this conversation yesterday, and
Do you regret having me go first?
you took all the ideas. No, man, yeah, it's such a point of privilege and immense gratitude that I sit here getting to say, I feel like I get to live out my life's purpose at EV. And I really feel in alignment, with all the different pieces and parts of myself and the sustainability that EV has brought to my life. But again, that's such a point of privilege. And so I think my thing is that purpose means something different to everyone. And so if there's something in your life that you feel is out of that alignment, or you feel that something is missing, you might not have the money for the crazy job coach, or to invest in something crazy on Instagram to change everything, but just take some time and sit with yourself. I know I did a lot of that before making the big jump out of the airplane to switch things up and come to EV, was just sit and ask yourself, what is that purpose even? What brings meaning to your life? Because that's going to look so different to everyone. But I do think that it is a great question that makes doing hard things a little easier.
I love that. Yeah. If I were to add or even just answer the question myself a little bit, what is coming to mind after listening to you both is definitely what you just said, Christine, just giving yourself the grace that Casey's talking about and giving yourself time to understand yourself, to not feel like you have to figure it out right away, and start with just little things like, what do you enjoy? What gives you a sense of enjoyment in life? And then maybe, not being afraid to talk to people about it, like just talking with your manager or, your peers, like down the road, like I'd be interested in being able to do more work that I feel even more invested in, and not being afraid to just venture the conversation. But at the same time, I love your point, Casey, that there's an inherent purpose or meaning in just doing good work and being rewarded for it. So yeah, there's a lot of angles to this. Ultimately, I guess your point, Christine, is everyone has to kind of think it through for themselves, like what gives them the best sense of purpose that they can have for themselves. It's about self-understanding ultimately is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and that understanding may not be what your parents or your teachers or your professors or other people in your life have told you should matter to you. So I think that's about, to your point, finding what matters specifically to you and trying to kind of tune out the other voices.
And that can be a lot of things. It can be your kids. It can be other things in life that you just really want to spend time doing. And there's no right or wrong answer to this question ultimately. Yeah.
Chris, I have to know, what did you want to be when you grew up? You can't escape the question.
Inquiring minds, Chris.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have a similar answer to Casey's, which is professional basketball player. That's what I was supposed to be. I'm so glad that didn't work out, honestly. But yeah, I mean.
Tell me you grew up in Indiana without telling me you grew up in Indiana.
Exactly.
What team were you going to play for?
Oh, well, probably I should say Pacers, but I would have wanted to play for the Bulls probably. So, Michael Jordan. It was that era. Well, this has been a ton of fun. I want to thank you both for coming on Empowered Owners, and I'm sure maybe there'll be more chances in the future for you to come back on. So thank you both for coming on Empowered Owners.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Christine.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Christine and Casey. Empowered Owners is a podcast by and for the employee owners of Empowered Ventures. Special thanks to Share Your Genius for producing. You can find show notes and transcripts on our website at empowered.ventures. Full video episodes are on YouTube at empowered_ventures. If you have a question for us about EV, our companies, or employee ownership, contact us at hello@empowered.ventures. You can also text or leave a voicemail at 317-643-2383. Thanks for tuning in.